All right. And this is Brandon Helwig. I'm the publisher of UCFsports.com. And I'm honored today to be joined by Aaron Dickens of Red Raider Sports, part of the Rivals.com network, to preview this Saturday's game in Lubbock between the UCF Knights and Texas Tech Red Raiders. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm honored to join you guys. I hate that I'm following Space Week. I feel like that's a tough task, but I'll do my best.
Yeah, well, Space Week kind of is continuing a little bit. Houston coach Dana Holgerson sort of took a little jab during his radio show last night. So that's kind of got some people in a tizzy wondering maybe UCF might break him out again in the last weekend when we host Houston down here.
That'd be great. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, those uniforms are slick. The logo is slick. The color scheme is slick. And, if you get a win over Houston out of it too, it's even better.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's really, it sounds like you know a little bit about it. That's really caught on. It's really been a thing at UCF since 2017, and just, the ties to NASA being right down the road on Cape Canaveral. So that's really been a fun thing. But yeah, just first of all, just kind of tell us about your background a little bit. How long have you been following Texas Tech? Did you go to school there? Did you grow up a fan? Just kind of what's your history with Texas Tech?
Yeah, so I grew up in a family full of Aggies. Everywhere I looked, parents, grandparents, uncles. I only applied to Tech out of high school. My first time to visit Lubbock was for freshman orientation. And let me tell you that drive up 84, especially 20 some odd years ago, a little bleak for someone that grew up and born and raised in Houston. But I fell in love with the place, had a great time at Tech. And after about 2 years back in Houston after graduating, I came back to Lubbock as fast as I can. I've been covering Tech since 2005 with Red Raider Sports. I host a radio show up here and have since 2012, and now I work full time for Rivals and Yahoo Sports.
Yeah. So since you mentioned that, you're from the Houston area, right? Is that what you said?
Born and raised.
What's kind of the dynamic of Texas Tech within the state of Texas? Where's the biggest draw for students? Do you get a lot of students from, say, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, obviously being the big metros? What's kind of that dynamic?
Sure.
Obviously, a lot of people go to Texas and A&M and the other schools in the state. What's kind of the state atmosphere like?
So a lot of students from Dallas, right? That's probably their biggest numerically alumni base. I think that if you look at like season tickets, right? Most of the out-of-town folks that have season tickets are from the Midland, Odessa area, because that's not just a super punishing drive. Little bit of Amarillo, all around West Texas, and you have some Houston too. Anecdotally, and granted, I haven't been in high school for 20 years, but when I was in high school, it was a lot more A&M, a lot more Texas. You had LSU, some Ole Miss. Houston is just a big jumbled mess of folks.
Yeah, would you say West Texas, is that this kind of Texas Tech? Do they kind of own West Texas in terms of just fan base and just kind of rooting interest, or is it still kind of split even on that side of the part of the state?
I think that if you conducted some sort of like very detailed census, you probably have more Tech fans than anything else, but I don't think that it's some kind of overwhelming percentage. I mean, you still have a healthy number of Texas fans, some A&M fans. Oklahoma State is actually very popular. The further up the panhandle you go, they have beaten Texas Tech quite a few times. I mean, a lot of times actually head to head for prospects out of Amarillo. So it's a good, decent mix.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about this year's Texas Tech team. This is Joey Maguire's second season in Lubbock. He was a known commodity in high school for years. I know he'd been at Baylor the past few years as associate head coach. And so, when Tech made the decision to, move on from Matt Wells, was Joey Maguire, was he instantly a guy that people thought would be in the mix? Was it a surprise when Tech went in that route? Just kind of set the stage for how you got to this Joey Maguire era.
Yeah. So when they decided to move on from Matt Wells, a little bit over 2 years ago, he had kind of been in the background in terms of fans' minds. There's a poster on RedRaidersports.com that have longtime friends with Maguire, and so I think that the folks on that board especially had maybe more of an insight into him as a coach and a person than maybe your Joe Blow average Tech fan.
Right.
Just because he talked him up so much, not like an annoying or whatever way, but just like, hey, this guy's for real. You know when you're around him, etc. When they fired Matt Wells, I don't think that Maguire was instantly like 1A candidate. They talked to Jeff Traylor. Sonny Dykes was in the mix there because at the time he was still, I guess, an analyst at SMU, or the head coach at SMU rather. But Maguire quickly kind of rocketed to the top, and I think that once they spoke with him, I think that's all they needed to hear.
Yeah, obviously, I've seen, I've heard a little bit of Maguire the last couple of years, listened to a couple of coaches' shows. I watched the little video edit, I guess the social media team put out after this Kansas game, and I guess it kind of, spliced his locker room speech in there, which was kind of neat. So, what's kind of been the consensus in year 2 with Maguire? Obviously, I think he's been regarded as a very good recruiter.
Sure.
This season, I know every game is tough. That opening the season at Wyoming and having to go there. Just was a difficult task, and obviously that was a 2 overtime loss. You had to play Oregon. You hung with Oregon for a while. So, what's kind of been the consensus? I know some people thought maybe Texas Tech could be a dark horse in the Big 12 this season. Maybe
they received first place votes, right? In the preseason poll, they were picked 4th, and even Maguire himself was talking about, hey, this team would beat last year's team by 2 touchdowns, right?
Yeah,
and he kind of throwing some barbs at Texas. Hey, we want to win the Big 12 before they leave, just stuff like that. And you gotta realize, and this is probably not something that other fan bases would kind of be aware of or cognizant of, but up until that Wyoming loss, really, there had not been really many or any periods of frustration, aggravation, discontent from the fan base toward Maguire, toward his staff. That's almost 2 years. Right.
Yeah.
And because he was hired in early November, and, from the jump, winning on the recruiting trail, which has consistently been a struggle for Texas Tech. Mike Leach wasn't just super invested in recruiting. Cliff hated it. He's come out and said as much after the fact.
Yeah.
Matt Wells prioritized the transfer portal a bit more than traditional high school recruiting. And so for Maguire to do what he's been able to do in the traditional recruiting kind of arena is very celebrated around here. And they go 8-5 last year. They beat Texas at home. As you can imagine, that's a huge kind of stock boost win for him, more so than, beating, Kansas State or Baylor or whatever. Right. Closing out the regular season with a win over Oklahoma as well, big stock boost. And then the bowl win, right? They're 8-5 after a period of just misery under Matt Wells and the latter portion of Cliff Kingsbury. And so up until Wyoming, it was all roses. They lost an assistant coach in January. They replaced him the next day with, someone from Baylor, an upgrade, a lateral, like no change. And so I think that it was on some level kind of shocking to this fan base that, bad things can happen under Maguire like that, because up until that point it really hadn't. This year's been tough. It was tough from the jump. I think that it would be a mistake to kind of pin all of their issues on, Tyler Shuck has been hurt, because as you mentioned, they lost to Wyoming, right? They're up 17-0 early in the first half, and then it's almost like they were surprised that Wyoming kept playing. Offense didn't look very good. The running game, as surprising as that seems now, with Taj Brooks as prolific as he has been in the run game was non-existent in Laramie. And then they put up a pretty valiant effort against Oregon. But your quarterback turns the ball over multiple times. Not going to win many games like that. Get off to a slow start. I think they've rebounded okay. But this at 5-5, certainly not what anybody was expecting or hoping for.
So what's been the situation at quarterback? Tyler Shook got hurt. Am I right? And kind of what's his status? Is he out for the rest of the year? Is the backup?
Sure.
Really
so Tyler Shook, 6th-year senior, Oregon transfer. This was his first year again, and he was in college for 6 years. First time that he's had the same offensive coordinator in back-to-back seasons. right? And so I think expectations were pretty high for him. He's a big kid. He carries himself like a professional. And, as you might imagine, being in his 6th year, not taking a whole lot of classes. So it's just really just
Yeah.
football for him. And yeah, he gets hurt against West Virginia, lands hard on his leg, tried to give it a go, almost made it worse, perhaps. That's what it looked like on television. And so he's done. Yeah, he's out. He's done. Baron Morton, the backup, he's from Eastland, which is in West Texas. If you're driving to the game from Dallas, you'll pass through there. So he's kind of a West Texas kid, young player, relatively highly regarded as a recruit. But he also got hurt in Morgantown, shoulder injury. And so, he's been able to play through that for the most part. He didn't play against BYU. They lost that game because the third string freshman quarterback couldn't execute a handoff a few times. So he's limited. Baron Morton is. He's going to start on Saturday. He's going to play. But if you watch that Kansas game at all, not a lot of zip on the ball. I think that they're kind of trying to play around it, scheme around it, but there's only so much you can do. So yeah, I think that's, if you're a Tech fan, that's a major concern, not just for Saturday, but for the season finale in Austin too.
Right. Tell me a little bit about Taj Brooks, Texas Tech's running back. UCF was facing Ellie Gordon II last week, and now they got another, top guy nationally in Brooks. And I'm looking, I guess the last 7 out of the last 8 games, he's rushed for 100 more yards. And the only game he didn't rush for 100, he rushed for 98. So it's been a pretty good streak with him. It looks like he carries the load a lot.
He's a physical runner, right? I think he has really good feet. He's not going to run away from anybody. He's not going to, make one person miss and then, hey, it's 6. But he's very, very patient. He'll let things develop, and he's very, very tough to bring down, right at the line of scrimmage. He'll dance around. It's going to be tough to get him for a loss, but he's more kind of workhorse than, big play in a bottle, right?
Yeah.
So they have a kid named Cameron Valdez, number 0, who plays a little bit, and he's got a bit more speed. But he's not where Taj is in terms of durability, in terms of pass pro. So if you see him on Saturday, barring any kind of injury, it'll just kind of be, bits and pieces.
Right. And who are some of the other players on offense to keep an eye on? Some receivers, offensive line, tight end. Who are some other players to watch in your opinion?
I mean, this is. I think if you've been a Tech fan for the last 25 years, you've become an expert really on 2 things more than anything else because of what all you've seen. I think you're an expert in like what a good passing game looks like, right? And you're an expert in bad defense because Tech fans have seen a lot of both over the years. And this passing offense is just rotten. There are multiple reasons for that. I don't think that you can pin it on just play calling, just quarterback injuries. But you really don't have a consistent playmaker at receiver. I mean, Miles Price, number 1, is an older player, veteran. He'll get you some tough yards. He'll get you a tough catch. But again, much like Taj Brooks, he's not going to make one person miss and then just outrun everybody. Coy Eakin is number 8, freshman. I think he's done some good things, but also just a freshman and also not going to make anybody pay for one missed tackle. Beyond that, you have a bunch of guys. Jerron Bradley, number 9, looks the part. He's a big kid. He certainly flashed a lot last year. He was preseason All Big 12 going into this year. And he made a great play against Kansas that helped them win the game at the end, that drive with less than a minute to go. But you just haven't seen a whole lot of that, Brandon, this whole year from him. Xavier White, number 14, can do some nice things. He's kind of a converted running back. But again, not someone that's going to make you pay for one missed tackle. And that's the entire receiving core. I mean, they have some tight ends that they like. Baylor Cup, Mason Tharp, they look the part. I think they're, good in the blocking game. They certainly have a large catch radius, but we just haven't seen a whole lot from them in terms of their involvement. Now, and we talk about this on my show every day, right? How much of that is them, right? How much of that
Mhm.
is not being schemed open? How much of that is you've played three different quarterbacks this year? The one that is available right now is clearly compromised, and not only doesn't have just a lot of zip on his passes, but they're also limiting his practice reps to kind of save that shoulder. So in terms
Right.
of timing and rhythm, you're all out of whack. So it's a complicated issue. Again, I don't think that there's just like one thing that you can blame, but the end result is a passing game that just has not been there this year.
So would you say there's more confidence on defense? When I'm looking at the Big 12 only stats, looks like Tech is, near the top of the league and, scoring defense, total defense. Is there more, I know there's an experienced defensive coordinator, a former
Sure.
head coach at Fresno leading that group, but tell us a little bit about the Texas Tech
Yeah, I mean,
defense.
I think the defense, they've not been perfect, right? They could have made a play and won you the game in Laramie. They gave up some big plays against Kansas last week. They're not some elite unit, but they play really, really hard. They're generally pretty disciplined, and I think you have some good players there. I mean, on the interior, the defensive line, Jalen Hutchings, Tony Bradford, 97 and 95, sixth-year seniors. I don't think either of them are going to be, a decade-long NFL career, right?
Right.
Not going to be first-round draft picks, but they're really, really good college defensive linemen, right? You've got some depth in the secondary. I think you have some pieces on the edge that you like, although, when you lose a first-round draft pick, edge, that hurts, and they're still kind of trying to fix that, Tyree Wilson. But they've been solid. They don't turn the ball over as much as you would like. They don't force as many negative plays as maybe you would like if you were kind of drawing up an ideal scenario. But they just kind of generally get it done. Kansas State ran all over them. Avery Johnson, it was probably their worst performance of the year. I think if you're Texas Tech, you look at a John Rice Plumlee, who's getting healthier and healthier from his leg injury, and go, that's that could be an issue.
Yeah.
But generally they've been pretty consistent, and I think in the second half especially, I don't know if it's adjustments, if it's sign stealing. I mean, I don't know what it is, but they've been much better in the second half typically than in the first.
Gotcha. So what's kind of the fan base feeling heading into this game? It's going to be senior night in AT&T Stadium or Jones AT&T Stadium. It's 2 5-5 teams going at it. So someone's going to leave the game
Sure.
being bowl eligible. But, for UCF, they still got Houston, a very winnable game at home the last week. You guys got to go on the road to Texas. So is this kind of considered a must win for Texas
Yeah, I
Tech?
mean, I think that's fair. I don't know that that's been enunciated as such, but I think that's pretty much how everyone feels, at least from a fan base standpoint.
Right.
I think that Tech fans probably felt a lot better about this game like 3 weeks ago, right? 4 weeks ago.
And
But now
UCF fans feel a lot better after this past
sure,
week.
yeah,
The same
absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
So it's going to be tough, and I think they all recognize that. And I don't think that, and certainly the offense's performance on Saturday in Lawrence, I think, is a big component of it too, right? Like that Kansas
Yeah.
defense is not elite. They've got great offensive skill. They've got two really good quarterbacks when they're healthy. The third string is, he's just a young kid. But I think only scoring 13 points or 16 points, whatever it was, against that KU defense,
Yeah.
a little bit alarming. And so if you can't score more than that against UCF, you're not gonna win.
Yeah. So for Texas Tech to win on Saturday and to be successful, they need to do what?
Well, I mean, I think that you need to, contain John Rice Plumlee, and not let them put up a big number. You got to take care of the football with as compromised as your offense is, and you have to do enough in the passing game to make UCF not just clog the middle, clog the box, and just key on Taj Brooks.
Right.
If they do that, then they could win the game. If they don't, then it's going to be a long night at Jones Stadium.
Obviously, this is going to be my first trip to Lubbock. I'm not sure how many UCF fans are coming out. This probably will be the most lightest attended from a road traveling standpoint for UCF this year. It's Thanksgiving travel, technically, with the airline, so it was an expensive trip. So it'll be fun anyway. But tell us, why do I see Texas Tech called Tortilla Tech when I look at opposing fan bases? They say Tortilla Tech. I know there's a little bit of a tradition of tossing tortillas. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, if you're in the stadium on Saturday for the opening kickoff, there will be a just deluge of tortillas tossed from the stands onto the field, mostly from the student section.
Okay.
And that tradition dates back 30 plus years. I don't know that the exact origin, I think, has maybe been lost to legend, but it's been something that they've been doing again, for 30 years. So I don't know that anyone around here takes Tortilla Tech as an insult. I mean, they're delicious too. Okay. I wouldn't eat one that's thrown around on Saturday, but just in general, right. Sure.
Right. So do they just do it at pregame, at kickoff? Do they do it
just opening?
Okay, so they don't throw it at the opposing team.
No, it's not. It's not at anybody. I'm sure there are some knuckleheads that'll try to whip it, but it's just kind of up in the air onto the field. The smart people, Brandon, will actually bite out the center of the tortilla, kind of hollow it out so that it goes farther.
It goes farther. All right. Sure. I remember there's frisbees that were like that, went a lot further.
Yeah, I mean, like
back in the day.
UCF's working on orbital entry areas and stuff, and we're focused on how can we get this tortilla to fly a bit farther.
Yeah. What do you remember about David Gibbs? He's on UCF's coaching staff, sure. Co-defensive coordinator. I know he's been a defensive coordinator in years past at Texas Tech. What do you kind of remember about Gibbs when he was in Lubbock?
I think Gibbs is a really interesting guy. I enjoyed his press conferences. I felt like, not a lot of coach speak. He would tell it to you pretty straight.
He's brutally honest. We don't talk to him that often, but he is brutally honest.
When Kingsbury hired him before the 2015 season, he was coming off of a very successful stint at Houston. And that was viewed as kind of a coup for Cliff and for Tech. And he improved the defense. I mean, he did. But it got a little bit maybe stale later on. I think part of that was I don't think that Gibbs I think he's got a lot of strengths, right? I don't know that like recruiting is necessarily at the top of that list. And I think in a lot of staffs, I think maybe even UCF, that's fine. You can kind of cover that up with some other people on staff. But with that Texas Tech staff, I mean, again, Cliff hated recruiting. Just abhorred it. And so I think, when your head coach hates it and doesn't try to really hide it, that kind of, trickles down to the rest of the staff. And so I think eventually the quality of defensive prospects that the program is bringing in, again, that's not all on Gibbs, right? I'm not pinning that all on him, but I think ultimately that kind of took a toll.
What's the Texas Tech view of this new Big 12? Obviously, with the Pac schools coming in next year, I know fans are upset about losing annual games with Texas, but for Texas Tech, especially when you look at recruiting rankings, I know you talked about Maguire's, track record as a good recruiter with the connections to Texas high schools. That it looks like this could be a new opportunity for Texas Tech to kind of get a foothold and maybe win a conference championship. So what's kind of the common view around Lubbock about all these changes you've seen?
Yeah, I think people are excited. I think that they're excited because the Big 12 is kind of perceived to be on offense a little bit, right? Kind of be the aggressor. I mean, you have to remember that for fan bases of Texas Tech or Baylor or Iowa State or Kansas State, this league was on the verge of falling apart in 2010. Now, Tech would have been on the right side of that, but just barely. And then Longhorn Network, 10-team league, Missouri A&M out, Nebraska out, et cetera. And for 5 to 8 years, it was just the league was a punching bag. Dysfunctional, unhappy, just, taking shots from all corners, really. And so for the Big 12 to rebound from that gut punch in 2021, right, where Texas and Oklahoma leave, pivot quickly to add 4 really good programs, and then a couple of years later steal 4 from a power conference, that's a huge, I don't know, just mental boost. Because, just cards on the table, there are not a lot of programs in the Big 12 right now, at least like the current Big 12 or even just the legacy members, that would for sure kind of be on the right side of things if there is some kind of breakaway in the future, right? And so to kind of have this added sense of security, I think is very, I don't know, it's comforting.
Yeah, we got the Big 12 scheduling matrix a couple weeks ago. There weren't very many, dedicated or annual rivalries are going to keep on the schedule every year for Texas Tech. Who is the remaining rival? Is there a top rival with Texas leaving?
I mean, Texas Tech is clearly the number 3 public school in the state, right? Their enrollment is very big. They were for the longest time the 3rd winningest program in the Big 12 when Mike Leach was here. I think Tech fans kind of view themselves, the program at least is kind of that's where it should be. But the problem, the interesting part, I don't know how you want to describe it, but their position is they don't really have a true rival, right? Like look at Texas, right? Tech fans hate Texas, right? That's if Joe Maguire wins in a couple of weeks, right? They'll build a statue for him. I'm slightly exaggerating, but like suddenly 7-5 or 8-4 7-5 wouldn't seem so bad, or 6-6 if they lose this weekend and win in Austin. But if you're Texas, I mean, your primary rival is Oklahoma, right? You also have a rivalry with A&M, and you have a lot of history and hate toward Arkansas. So, I mean, Tech is 3rd on that list, 4th. A&M. Tech fans hate A&M. And for the longest time, that was actually a very good series. That Tech largely dominated from the mid-90s to the end of the 2000s. But again, A&M looks at Texas. That's their primary rival. TCU and Baylor, they're primary rivals for each other, even though the rivalry has now been renamed the Blue Bonnet Battle, which is terrible. They need to workshop that some more, Brandon. But the Tech Baylor series, until it breaks next year, right, or the year after that, because of this scheduling matrix, the longest active streak in Texas, right, has been played, however many decades in a row every year, and then it gets broken. But Baylor's primary rival is TCU. And so I think that and I'm sure that, I mean, I've seen this on UCFsports.com, people kind of theorizing, spitballing, hey, what should they do with the schedule before this all came out?
Right.
And, I think Tech fans were really hoping for a permanent series with Oklahoma State, right? Because the Pokes, kind of the same thing. They're losing Oklahoma
and Bedlam. And
I think that you could, even though it's not some kind of official, formal titled rivalry, I think that there are a lot of those kind of one-offs that you could have paired up in the league. And I think Houston would be tough to kind of place. I think UCF would be tough to place, but it didn't work out that way. So
I've seen
surprisingly they didn't call me, which was a mistake.
Yeah, I would have preferred an annual series with Cincinnati. It's been a rivalry. It's not on the level of UCF and South Florida and War on I-4, but there's been some little bit of tradition there. But I can understand why they did it. I mean, obviously, you got to keep those in-state rivalries in Utah and Arizona intact, and Kansas. But yeah, just looking at recruiting, and I know is the NIL scene in Lubbock with the Matador Club. What do you know about kind of Texas Tech's competitiveness, NIL wise? It seems to me, it looks like it'd be, one of the top, collectives in this new Big 12. Has that been a pretty good thing for Texas Tech?
Texas Tech, the last 10 years have not been great on the field, right? Ever since Mike Leach left, really. It's been, there have been some dry spells, and I think that has led to maybe periods of apathy among the fan base, or some kind of doom and gloom. But I will give Texas Tech this: its athletic department, its leadership, its donor base, its alums. They were, if not first in line, they were in that first group. I mean, they embraced NIL wholeheartedly from really the moment it started, and I think that jumpstart has really given them an advantage. I think that they're still all in on NIL. I think they just announced relatively recently the softball team is now getting a team-wide deal for I think $10,000 a player, which it's not gigantic money, but it's better than nothing. And I would guess it's softball.
They kind of made waves. Was it a year ago? Matador Club said every 100 players on the football team are going to make at least 30,000. Is that what the deal was?
I think it's 25K, but right. And so I think you're even seeing that. Yeah. You're seeing that now with some preferred walk-on commitments, because suddenly it's not a scholarship, but at least you have kind of that to fall back on. And so I think it is a bit of an advantage. But Cody Campbell is a former letterman here. He was an O-lineman under Mike Leach. He struck it pretty good in West Texas and in oil and gas. He's donated a ton of money. His name's on the field. He's a regent. He's very involved. And Tech is lucky to have a lot of folks like him that can help.
Yeah, last thing for myself and for any other UCF fans coming to Lubbock this weekend, just tell us a little bit about Lubbock. What should people see and do? Are there some restaurants that you advise checking out?
Yeah, so Lubbock kind of gets this this bad rap for being some kind of dirt covered outpost in the middle of the West Texan desert. And while they're not skyscrapers, on the skyline, I mean, there's 300,000 people here, maybe a bit more. It's a pretty good sized little city.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of stuff to do. If you're into kind of the bar scene, there's the Depot District. There are a number of breweries in town. Two Docks is very, very good. They have some wineries if you're maybe a bit more refined. Around campus on game days, popping, bustling.
Yeah.
Go to Chimmy's, get a margarita. They have an organized kind of tailgate area called Raider Alley. It's on the engineering key, which is not that far from the stadium. And they normally have a pretty decent kind of entertainment act. I think it's 3 hours before kick, give or take. And I don't know if this has been announced yet. We'll just break it. I think it's Smash Mouth. So if you want to go, listen to Smash Mouth, they'll be performing, I think, before the game. New headliner, of course.
I was about to say, I know there was.
No, it's a hologram, Brendan. No.
Yeah. So, how would you say a Texas Tech's atmosphere is football stadium wise? When I've asked people that have been to most of these places, I know Kansas State gets mentioned, Oklahoma State maybe amongst the new Big 12. How would you kind of rank? Maybe you're a little biased. I don't know. How would you rank Texas Tech's atmosphere against everyone else?
It's funny that for much of the 2000s. Texas Tech was a really hard place to play. They didn't lose a lot of home games. And it held about 55,000 people or whatever. But actually, even during Mike Leach's final year, it kind of started to kind of fall off. And I don't know if it's because they began to lose some kind of games that they weren't used to losing. I mean, they're going to have I would guess, close to full house. The stadium is being renovated right now. And so, UCF will be staying. The team will be kind of dressing in some temporary locker rooms. They've ripped up the whole south end zone. So you'll see an active construction site on Saturday if you're there. 2 big cranes, and that affects the atmosphere a bit. I mean, it's several thousand seats that have been taken out. But yeah, folks get loud. They get rowdy. There's pyro, after touchdowns, and they did a drone show a couple of weeks ago, and big video board. It's a good time. It's a bit louder when they're winning compared to when they're losing, but I would guess that's probably comparable to most places.
Yeah. So the ongoing improvements to the stadium, will those be ready by next season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the plan is to be ready for next season, and I'll give Tech a lot of credit for this. They have been in almost a constant state of facilities improvements for the last 20 years. Really, it's been nonstop, and for major revenue producing sports, not new softball stadium. They redid the west side of the stadium in the early 2000s. Then they did the east side, and then they redid the north, and now the south. They've got a relatively brand new practice facility immediately to the south of the stadium. They're going to break ground on the new football building as soon as the stadium is completed next year. They've got a top of the line basketball facility. The arena is really, really nice. So it's, I think if you take some time to walk around campus on Saturday, if you go, I think that you'll enjoy it. I mean, they got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I know.
And the weather should be great too.
Yeah, I was looking for UCF. That's fantastic. I mean, UCF's not going to have a true, cold weather game this entire season, but
just wait until Ames. Ames in November is a special kind of hell, Brandon.
That's next season. The UCF goes to Ames.
But pray for September there.
Let's hope so. But looking at the apparel deal, Texas Tech was one of the handful of Under Armour schools looking for, Under Armour's getting out with a lot of these college deals. And I guess what Patrick Mahomes might have scooped it a few weeks ago, right? That Texas Tech will be going to Adidas, right?
So,
is it next season? How are fans feeling about that?
Sure. So beginning next July, Tech will switch over from being an Under Armour program department-wide to Adidas. Their deal expires then. I mean, Under Armour was interested. They were involved. They were bidding. This wasn't a situation where they were just kind of like, "Hey, we're not
okay."
Because
they got out of some of these schools.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Because Tech, I think, was one of the very first programs to go all in with Under Armour. They started with football in 2006, and I think by 2007, maybe 2008. Every other program on campus was outfitted with Under Armour. And this was, again, early Under Armour. So you had a lot of complaints about, hey, the shoes kind of suck or this or that. So they've had a long relationship. I think that it's a good relationship. I don't think that that Tech had any kind of issues with Under Armour. I think that they valued their partnership. But when the best football player on the planet, Brendan, is, Adidas, and is just like 25 years old or whatever, and his name is already on your stadium, if you have a chance to kind of partner up with him a bit more, I think you do that. And so Mahomes was integral to this happening, this Adidas deal. It's a 10-year deal. He really wanted to make that work. And I think that probably not next year, but as early as 2025, you're going to be wearing Patrick Mahomes branded football jerseys, not Adidas. So,
so they're going to do what Jordan does, but do it with Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I think Kansas had approached Adidas also and said, "Hey, if you're doing like Patrick Mahomes stuff, like we're right down the road,
Kansas City.
All of our fans love the Chiefs. Like, slap it on us, big boy, And I think he was like, "Hey, if I'm going to do it with anybody, it's going to be Texas Tech." And he is still very invested in the department, in the university. He was at the Kansas game last week. He'll come down for a basketball game every now and then. They inducted him in the Ring of Honor last year, very, very early.
Yeah.
But again, he's still around. He's still very involved. And I think that's fairly unique for someone of his stature, right? I mean, he's, again, the best football player on the planet, and he's still repping the double T.
Yeah, what do you remember about Patrick? It's always kind of interesting how oftentimes the best players of the NFL aren't necessarily the ones that you would have expected coming out of college, not necessarily the Heisman winners and whatnot. Sure. What do you kind of, as you look back and seeing what he's doing now?
Whenever I think of Patrick Mahomes and Tech, what comes to me more than anything else, Brandon, is that how in the hell did Tech just win like 13 games with him at quarterback? Like, how is that even humanly possible? But they did. From here it's possible, and that's what happened. I mean, he was electric. I mean, it was a highlight show every Saturday. Didn't always result in a win. Back in 2016, one of the most incredible games that I will ever witness in person, him and Baker Mayfield just putting up video game numbers, back and forth. And, Tech lost that game. And so, that's kind of the sour to the sweet with when you talk about Patrick Mahomes and Tech, is that, just didn't win a lot of games. Not really his fault. That those defenses were just really, really bad. And I think that, I think Cliff probably didn't put them in great situations. Not a lot of, great complementary football
Right.
in the Cliff Kingsbury era. But yeah, it was electric. I mean, it was really, really something. And so Tech fans not really surprised. I don't think by what he's been able to do so far with the Chiefs.
Well, Aaron, I appreciate you joining us this
Anytime.
afternoon. I've enjoyed learning more about Texas Tech and all these new schools in the Big 12. Thanks for coming on, and I guess I'll see you maybe in the press box on Saturday.
I hope you have a safe trip. Hope everyone else has a safe trip, and I hope you all have a good time.
All right. Thank you, Aaron.
You
Take
bet.
care.
Thank you.
Thanks.